Let's see. Let's see. Big hey now to my many, many viewers out there. Happy Friday. Happy T-Share Friday as we approach the end of the year. Woo. All right. Watchers are off the hook. Lots of people out there I see. Hey, Fast, how are you? And Johnny, Chaotic Creations. Good to see you. All right. So, off we go. Let's go ahead and take a look at our 30-day look ahead. What we're expecting to see over the next 30 days or so. So as expected, I mean, a lot of, I say this a lot of, it's repetitive, but we always have new viewers coming in. What I'm documenting is that the contract works as expected. And so this is a day, weekly, whatever. However often I do the streams, just watching and seeing what's happening with the contract, with the HEX contract, immutable, unchangeable, decentralized. And you can see our 30-day look ahead. Things are proceeding as expected. We see similar shapes of the curve earlier in the month going forward. And then there's some increases here, maybe a little bit offset a little bit maybe, but going up to maybe 43, 44K on each chain. So it looks like the 3rd of January, stakes will have their last day that could be ended. And then on the 4th, they could end. And if they end on the 4th, we would be 44,252 on Pulse Chain and 44,654. So this is the ratcheting effect of the T-share rate as we go up and to the right for HEX. And I assume, for those watching, I'm getting lots of funny comments now in the streams, but for those watching, they're interested. You guys are interested in HEX and HEX staking and mining, and have some level of belief in it. So it makes sense to talk about this stuff for us because we are thinking about it. So you can see this going up and to the right. We can see that our share rate going over time hasn't changed a lot. Right, it's going to be this slow grind upwards. The slope changed with the origin address staking that happened earlier in the year, but same old as far as how it looks and what'll happen. The contract is engineered so that new people get a better deal than they would have if it wasn't in place the way it is. What I mean by that is it's an even playing field as we go forward, or a more even playing field, I should say. Because the T-share rate goes up, it applies to everybody. It doesn't matter if you're a new staker or an old staker, you still have to pay the same amount of HEX for a T-share. And because that ratchets up, if you want to maintain any level of APR or APY in HEX terms, it's not about dollars, but about HEX units, then you have to maintain your T-shares, or at least keep, at least minimize how many that you lose. Because without bringing in more value and going out longer, you can't get more T-shares. And that's just a consequence of how it works. If we look at the changes that have been happening this week, it's been a few days since we've had a change. This is Pulse Chain side. Effectively looks the same. Just different wallets, maybe different stakes on the Ethereum side when we look at it. But you can see a steady increase. We had three changes showing in the top 10, last 10 on the 13th of December. And so very small changes, but it just shows you how it ratchets up throughout the day. It went up a 0.10 HEX on the first change, 2.5, 0.7. The 14th was a solo, went up 1 whole HEX for the day. But on the 15th, we went up twice, 3.6, 2.3. 16th twice, 0.30, 0.60. Now you can kind of envision these as little mini. It's not a halvening because we're not halvening, but little mini difficulty increases, right, for mining, if you want to relate it over to HEX or over to Bitcoin. And so what that means is even within a day, how quickly you move makes a difference. Now, these numbers are so small normally. Um, I don't know in practical terms it makes any difference whether or not you staked. I should say any meaningful difference between whether you staked at 43,541 or 43,543. But I think what it kind of shines a light on is eating the elephant one bite at a time. A lot of this stuff, I use the terminology boil a frog, where a lot of times users who are involved in different systems, and particularly in HEX, you don't really think of these changes as being a big deal, but they're constant, they're persistent, to use an RH recent term. They're persistent. They can persistently go up into the right. The difficulty goes up into the right to be able to do this. All right, so that's what we're seeing on changes. And of course, we do see some changes coming here into the future. Now, let's go take a look at a couple different things. All right, those are price related. All right, staking links are for new stakes are about what they've been. We see some variations here. On the EX side, we do have a little bit less than 4 years, 3.9 as the average for new stakes. What that says to me is that it's likely that we're not seeing as much short-term staking. Again, this is just an average of all of the stakes that have been made. On the pulse chain side, 3.4 years. So we clearly have been on a downtrend on the pulse chain side, flattening out on the Ethereum side. And that's because we have different sets of users, right? There may be a lot of overlap. Maybe it's an 80% Venn diagram overlap, but they do act a little bit differently. On the Ethereum side, the average of the open stakes only is 9.1 years, and on the HEX on Pulse Chain side, 9.2 years. Now let's get to this difficulty level, and I'm going to go look at PHEX just to show you what we've been seeing, and I want you to kind of look at these numbers, and they get highlighted here at the bottom when I select a stake. So we have just looking at the last 30 days of stakes that have ended, and they're up on the screen. Now I've got them in a particular order to kind of demonstrate this. We have, and this is by days, the longest stakes. So this is where the catch is, and you guys may have heard me talking about this concept of a hex walled garden, and the idea that we have this 15-year cycle. We've completed the first 5 years of the 15-year cycle. We have 2 more 5-year batches. We're into the second one. In the beginning, with the first 5 years, we had I don't know if I'd call it a mania, but we certainly had a lot of hex staking. And so there are people who became believers in the product market fit of HEX, and they staked a lot of HEX, right? And then with the changes in prices in the market and how things have proceeded into the future, we now do not have the same level of interest in staking. In fact, we saw staking fall off shortly after the top. It began its fall off and continue a downward spiral, even with very high APR. Then the OA came in and staked, and so now we even have a much lower APR, and so staking has fallen off even further. And what's curious about that is that, and somebody said this the other day to me, and maybe it was in one of the questions, like, HEX can never go up in price because of staking and the fact that people aren't staking. And I don't know that there's a correlation directly in that way. I mean, certainly HEX staking affects price in that, or affects demand of HEX, because if more people are staking, it does take more HEX off the market, right? But in itself, staking HEX does not change the value of HEX on charts, right? So it's the value change is a secondary effect. It's not a primary effect. And so this whole walled garden concept that I've gotten in my head really comes down to people who want to participate, who want the 4%, 3-4% for Quattro Cinco, which will increase over time. Today, they get exposure to price appreciation as well, and that's been a big topic. But for the general public, anybody coming in, general user, they're still looking at, hey, you're really telling me I need to lock up for 15 years and get 3%. And that number is so small that, it's not very enticing for people to lock up when they think they can get 10x, 100x, 1000x just by holding liquid, right? And so price action is going, and this has always been true. It's not like I'm saying something new. Price action is dependent on the market and what the supply and demand is. And so if there's great demand, I would expect to see the price go up, right? But if there's not great demand, and in fact goes the opposite way and people are selling, price goes down, that's just, I guess that's markets, right? How they work. Now, how does this go all the way back to my chart that I'm showing here? So you have this use case or potential case to examine where we're looking at these stakes that have ended, that started all the way back at the beginning of HEX. Now, those folks, they're subject to the same new share rate calculations as everybody else. But take a look at this very first one that came up on the top. It was a 35,000 HEX, 35,640 HEX staked on the first day of HEX. And they were able to obtain 7.87 T-shares. Now, they got a pretty good payout because we had that high APR all that time. And so the ROI on that was over 300%. But even at that point, for somebody who started the very same day that HEX launched, if they want to get the same number of T-shares, they now have to lock up for 2,200 days to be able to get that. And, so they have to come in at about the same amount of time, right? So they have to wait another 5 years. And when we say lock up, what I mean is they have to take their entire payout, both the principal and the reward, and stake for another 2,200 days, which is a little bit over 5 years, right? So it just gives you an idea of even what those folks have in their hands. And then if they, and they might even have to add HEX, right? And so just a little bit of HEX. So it's kind of like an either or. These numbers are so close. I think my numbers are coming up, add 37 HEX and go out 2,200 days. So they're nearly about break even in that, in terms of T-shares. They may actually be able to do it. But as we go along and we start looking at different ones, you can see that the numbers start to change. Now, how is that different than very short stakes? So I'm going to change the order on this. We'll give this a second to refresh. And we'll see how people who have done recent stakes, what they have to do. We'll look at that real quick. I probably could have done two screens, so I had it preset. Give this a few moments to update. Let's go see what we got going on in the chat. I see Rec Crypto out there from the actuator ecosystem doing some streams on that. Dewey Scum, good to see you. Hey, Mike, how you doing? How you doing, Mike? And then Tim, I see you, Tim. How are you? All right. Let's see this thing go. No, it's not there yet. All right. So what we're going to end up seeing, I think I might be able to actually, oh, there it goes. I went. Let's see if it updated on your screen first. I'm going to pick the very first one. Okay. So this is a 1 day stake. So we can see on this 1 day stake of 50,000. Now, I'm still curious as to who and what. I've always had this little conspiracy theory in my head. Like who and what type of contract, what kind of person is literally staking 50,000 HEX for 1 day? right? It certainly doesn't make economic sense. So I have always thought that there are people out there who set these up that said they were going to set them up. I always wonder what kind of automated contracts might be out there. But anyways, however that's happening, somebody did or something did stake 52,000 hex, 52,118 hex for one day, and obtained 1.21 T-shares, right? And their estimated payout in terms of reward is tiny, right? Tiny couple hex. And so for them to do the same thing, right, they have to put in 399 more hex to get the same number of days. It's kind of crazy, huh? So they would have to come in and put 399 more hex in, and that's for a very short stake. If we look at the days, we go down further. Let's find one that's a little bit further out, and but post. Let's go like something like 90 days. Let's see what that looks like. All right. Well, actually, I don't have a 90-day one. Okay, 33. All right. Let's go to like, here's a good one. It's over 1 million hex was staked originally. They either have to go out 42% longer now. These numbers are big and different compared to the ones we were looking for the old stakers. They have to either go out 42% longer or add 15,000 more hex to be able to get the same number of T-shares. So effectively, I guess what I'm trying to demonstrate, I know it's a lot of detail, a lot of numbers, but I'm trying to demonstrate here is that effectively for them to keep the same number of T-shares, they have to stay in the system, go out longer, or add more hex to get the same amount of yield. And so what that has created is this opportunity for these folks who do have the older stakes, who were the believers and staked. And now the question is, will they be converted to true believers for the second 5-year period? Meaning, will they restake? Will they restake? And so we do see quite a bit of restaking. So it's not that we don't see the T-shares being created. We just don't know per se, which, without doing like a complete analysis, which group of people is doing what. But let's go take a look at the restakes and what we've been seeing here lately. So again, just trying to emphasize that the believers have the opportunity to get a lot more T-shares because they have all this hex that they earned. And then the question is, what will they do with it? But they are treated just like the new users in terms of the amount of hex. And so they have a lot of hex that's out there. I mean, somebody was asking about circulating hex and whether it'll become staked. I don't know if it'll become staked, what people will do with it, whether they're just going to hold it. But clearly holding for many years liquid seems a bit silly. If that's what your plan is just to hold liquid, why wouldn't you try to earn? There's a number of ways to earn, but people do it, right? And sometimes they're forgotten wallets or whatever. So let's look at the drawdowns and what we've been seeing over the last month. And this goes to the point about how many T-shares are being recreated. So on the Ethereum side, in the last 30 days, we had 92,491 T-shares ended, but only 48,352 created. Right, or started. And so that gives us a delta of about 44,000, which means that the decay rate on the T-shares that are coming out is about minus 40%, 50%, which has been pretty consistent week over week. So another thing that you can kind of reference as to, hey, is there capitulation going on? All right, so we're seeing a drawdown. The drawdown on the Pulse Chain side, not as high, but still pretty significant, about 30%. All right. And so that means 30%, 31% of the T-shares held are not being recreated. Right. So that adds to, because this is actually capturing ended stakes. So that hex gets added to what we call circulating supply of hex. And so that's sitting out there liquid in people's wallets until they do something with it, right? Because they're not recommitting to the system. Um, and so that if we take those numbers and we look forward, we can see, yeah, a drawdown over the next month, probably of around 40,000, 44,000 on each chain. Now, this is DeFi, right? So I'm kind of guessing at what people are going to do. I don't know what they're going to do. I'm just looking at the numbers and just trying to draw some conclusions. But we can see, how many we lost over the last month and how many we would expect to lose over the next month. And when we look at that T-share count, one of the things that's really hard for people to get their heads around is what that change looks like. Because a lot of people might look at a chart like this and they're like, things haven't changed much, right? They're not really changing. But that's because the stabilizing effect of the OA and how the OA set things up. So if we go out into post OA staking this year, and we look at it, and I know I show this every week, but you can just see there is a downtrend on the T-shares, right? So when you isolate out the OA stakes and just looking at the average users, you're just seeing that the T-shares are going to be coming down, 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 down. And it's kind of obscured when we look at it with the OA included because it kind of looks flat, right? So this has created this opportunity for people who, again, you have to be interested in HEX and want to stake HEX, and that is an exclusive club of people that still believe in staking. Most people, if they're interested in HEX, are interested in, the narrative of extreme price movement, right? They're not after the 3 or 4%. Or even 1% if they're doing shorter stakes. They're not after that. They're after price appreciation. So that creates, even though that's kind of like what the crowd does, for those who want to stake, it means that you have a limited participation in staking, which means that you don't have as much competition, which means that you can set yourself up or set your strategy up in such a way to accumulate more and more HEX, more than certainly liquid holders, right? Because they're not getting more, they have the same amount. If we look into December this year, so far, we were coming up to rival what happened in November, but 1,284 T-shares made Quattro Cinco as opposed to about 1,317 last month. And if we look at that, if we look at how that plays out on our chart, we can look at let's do the leagues and see what that looks like. You can see that when we go all the way out to 2041, to be a Poseidon is simply 300 T-shares, right? 300 T-shares. Which, if you're going out that far, means that you need to have enough HEX times the share rate to get 100. And so I'm just going to gross it 100 times 43,000. I know it's not exactly right, but somebody could actually go out there and change the numbers a bit, but you can get a very big share and be almost 10% of the T-share market by simply staking 4 million or so HEX out in the future. So that's kind of crazy that's the case. And I have been seeing HEX stakes come through, usually 100, 150,000 going out Quattro Cinco. But this week I did see 1 million come through. So there are people participating and attempting to corner the market. But it's like I say that, and it's like, well, does that mean that is that FOMO? Everybody should go run and do this. Well, the thing is most people aren't thinking 15 years. They're not thinking 15 years. They're not even sure where they're going to be in 15 years, right? And so this is why you don't see that great amount of participation out there. But I think it's worth coffee money, for sure. All right, so here's our chart looking at 2040 and beyond, and where we go. Now, remember, this is set in log, guys, so log, log, and that's so we can actually see these bars here at the bottom, right? Because otherwise they'll look like they're zero. But we literally have this 16.7 million T-shares that will expire in April of 2040. And once those are done, all the T-shares that'll be left will be all these T-shares in front of it. Right now again, this is DeFi, and people can and do make their own decisions and decide what they're going to do. But you can see where we're stacking it up. We've got almost 2,000 in May of 2040, 1.4K, 1,400, 1,350, 1,000 in August, 1,800 in September, 1,500 in October, 2,600 in November. So these are not very high numbers. And so I don't know what the trend will end up being. Well, if we assume that this trend just kind of continues going forward into the future, we're just going to guess. Let's just guess that we see 2,000 T-shares per month and we don't see any change in sentiment. And so on average, 2,000 T-shares per month times 12, which is a year, times 15.2 years will mean that if we didn't see any increased demand, that when the OA ends, or it may not even end, but in April of 2040 out here, when the OA stakes come to expiration, somebody could good account their stakes and the T-shares go out of the pool, or it could be ended and the T-shares go out of the pool. So if the OA did nothing else during all this period of time and nobody staked beyond this goalpost of April of 2040 in terms of OA stakes, and we didn't change the rate, we would have 365,000 roughly T-shares looking forward. So the total amount would drop to something like 365,000. Again, this is kind of like a guess, but to illustrate it. So what does that mean? Well, if you're playing that game, that very long game, which is not a popular game, which is why I think we're talking so much about this. I'm talking so much about this being a walled garden of people who are interested in HEX. You then become the the benefit. You get benefited by all of the HEX that's coming out, and all of the HEX coming out would be shared by that 365,000 T-shares. So what would that look like, right? So I'm guessing that the payouts at that time will be about 90 million HEX per day, and if we divide that by 365,000, that would increase the payout per T-share to 246 HEX per T-share per day, if I got my math right. And so again, being able to stake out in here and being able, it's a very asymmetrical, high risk play. In that, nobody knows what the future holds, right? I mean, it's like way out there. This is a lot different than trying to, swap now, right, for things. So, if you wanted to get involved with that and maintain your ladder, you're one of several hundred, if not less, wallets that are doing that type of work. That's one of the reasons that Actuator gets me kind of ramped up, because in the Actuator protocol, you have the ability to stake out here and have access to some liquidity, not all of the liquidity, but some of the liquidity through the Actuator protocol. So that's something that's out there for people. And I think that, when we talk about the walled garden, I know some people interpret what I'm saying as it's the end of HEX. I don't think it's the end of HEX. I think it is. I think we're in the walled garden. I think we're refining the user set of people who are willing to take that asymmetrical position to earn HEX in the future. I mean, it's kind of like, I guess here's a fun one. We can kind of compare it to Berkshire Hathaway. There was a time where a person could have gone like any normal person could have reasonably had the expectation of getting a share of Berkshire Hathaway A, right? I forget what the price is right now. We'd have to go look it up. But most of us do not have $500,000 today to go get a Berkshire Hathaway A, Berk A share. Most of us don't, right? But there was a time where, if I was alive, I guess I could have done it. But I mean, there was a time where, average person could have done that. And it was many, many years ago. And so I guess that would be one way to relate this, is if this was going to succeed, if this succeeds very well into the future, you cannot go back, right, and get them. And so, yeah, it's just an asymmetrical opportunity. But again, guys, when we talk about that, a lot of people are like, well, wait a minute, the price. Yeah, you're right. The price can only go up when more HEX is taken off the market than put on the market, supply and demand. And so, yeah, we're just gonna have to keep watching that. I mean, we can't change how that all works. All right, let's go ahead and take a look in our chat here. I've already been jabbering for 30 minutes. Let's see what we got over here. All right. I want to highlight some of this stuff, guys. You have questions, drop them in the chat. We'll go look at some stuff. Yeah, Dewey. I think your point here. There would need to understand. People need to understand. There's even less T-shares in a decade from now than the last of the original Quattro Cinco stakers mature. Yeah. After 35, 36, you can see the numbers really drop down. But now it's obscured. It's obscured by the OA, and so it's another one of these things where things are going to happen. It's a setup where things are going to happen, and unless you know, you're not going to know, right? And so unless you're really into this ecosystem, again, another barrier to entry. I don't mean it negatively. It's just kind of a barrier to entry for people to know what's going to happen out there, because who's really following this information but people who come here, maybe to my streams, or if they're looking at it independently. They're not like really focused on this idea that the T-shares are coming down. And in fact, when we go look at the T-shares coming down, and this is on the PHEX side, right? Blah 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 coming down. They don't even realize necessarily that the reason these numbers, like the 18 million, the 17 million, are so high is because the OA has the 16 million coming out in 2040. And so if the OA is not doing with anything, effectively the user count, and we're just going to make it up because I haven't done the numbers on it, but let's just assume, let's take 16 million. So really, what's the number of T-shares in 2036? 2 million, right? The real number that are non-OA, 2 million, right? 1 million, you guys have to put up with I don't have a stylus, so 1 million in 2037, right? These are non-OA, T-shares. 100,000, over here right now in 2038. You get the idea. And I'll stop with my doodling. But you got to kind of get the idea, is that people, because it's out of sight, out of mind, and the OA kind of obscures this, not intentionally, but just through the mechanics of it. Unless you're really drilling down into this data, you just don't realize. I don't think people realize just how much opportunity potentially there could be in these later years, right? When we come out here, and and again, here's the thing: is to build your ladder and structure through this period of time. You already have to, you got to believe, you got to be willing to lock up, blah 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 blah, right? And so, I mean, how many people who aren't involved right now can you really talk to and be like, yeah, I'm interested, I'm going to go in, because they're looking at that APR and what's out there, and what they think they can get in crypto, because most people have come in to kind of get rich quick scheme. So this whole HEX system is definitely what I would call a very long-term type of a asymmetrical play when we're talking out there. I mean, how else could you describe it anyways? I mean, we're talking about 10 to 15 years from now. I mean, that's a long time out there. So yeah. And so again, and now what I'm seeing is, particularly with the actuator protocol, is these people doing stakes they're adding to stakes that are ending out here, and they're getting access to the liquidity, and they're farming, and they're doing all this other stuff, and so it's another opportunity for things to happen. Let's go take a look at, or for them to earn. Let's go take a look at the chat before I get too far behind. Let's see. Yeah, Rex saying, good point, won't restake. Yeah, exactly. And I think that's where people who were believers, Rick on crypto, they're no longer believers. And or maybe they'll come back, maybe they won't come back, but they're not going to come back as strong. And so again, there's this opportunity. It's asymmetrical. It's long term. It's kind of boil the frog. It's obscured, boil the frog, in that people don't even know the opportunity exists until they get out there. And that, it could get pretty crazy. I mean, I'd love to see, 246 hex per T-share. But here's the thing: is if we get to the point where, the APR is rising that quickly and to much higher numbers, then you would expect that the people will, people watching will begin to stake more, right? So we'll see a swing in the other direction. So it's likely we won't see, my fabled 365,000 T-shares in 15 years. It's unlikely that that'll be the case. It'll be higher, right? But just to illustrate the point, if that was to happen, and this is where the FOMO would come in eventually would come in, and we think the FOMO will come in with, and at the same time as we see prices go way up, that all of a sudden people are like, hey, I really want to have an opportunity to get those rewards, so they might do it. Yeah, at $5 plus hex, it would be pretty huge. You're right. Let's see what else. What else? Farming. Yeah, so I'm getting out of hex for good, keeping 100K, but put the rest in Pulse and Pulse 6. Yeah, some people feel that way about the cores, and that's fine. I've kind of gone in my thinking, I'd kind of gone the other way. I just keep a spread, and that I keep exposure. But I think, again, for me, what else would you expect me to say other than, I'm to keep a ladder, which is what I do. What else we have here? Does base have hex? No, I don't. They don't have the contract. But I went over there once to see if it had been bridged, but I hadn't seen anything yet. I don't know if there is a way to do that. But there is hex on other chains. I forget where, so I don't want to really say. But we'd have to go look. But there is hex on other chains, both in contract and that has been brought over through bridging. All right. And then Recton Crypto saying, yes, unfortunately, people have a reactive mentality versus a proactive approach, and I'm staying out of the game. Yeah. Well, and I think with crypto, right, we know at this point, if you don't know it's high risk, you really need to reassess what you're doing. And if you don't know that you can lose everything, you need to really reassess what you're doing. But that being said, it's DeFi, right? And if you're going to play the game of HEX, then you really have to be thinking long term. And so I think there's that opportunity for people that want to do it. Hey, who knows? Maybe we end up with just tokens and no value. I don't know. There's no way for me to know what's going to happen. I can think I know, but I'm going to have a lot of HEX one way or another. 15 years can't come soon enough, right? All right, let's see what else we want to talk about. All right, those are volumes. Let's see. What are we looking at for the volume spread at the moment for my tracked volume, just for Just for giggles, so volume had dropped about 50% lower than it is right now, and I'm seeing about 5 million in my track volume overall in the chain for the last 24. Look at the tracked stats real quick. 2.8 million of that volume in the top 10. So EDI Pulse, EUSDC Pulse, WETH Pulse, Pulse Hex, Pulse X Pulse. So common kind of pairs that are seeing that. So we're very slow right now in terms of volume. Very, very, very slow. If we look at our estimated payouts, we do have about 2 billion hex coming out over the next few weeks. And so part of that is going to be to watch and see what happens with it. I mean, I'm not like worried about the market per se, that it's all going to be sold or anything. But if we have 2 billion come out, what will those folks do? We'll see 1.2 billion restaked, short, medium, long. We'll see some long stakes come out of it. I don't know. We'll have to watch and see. But as we were showing, right, I kind of expect that some of it will not get restaked. Some of it will not get restaked. And we'll have to see where that goes. That's our payouts. So you can kind of see the profile. If we go out 12 months, you can see everything else pales in comparison to the OA stake ending in March. And again, that's a big gotcha in that we don't know what the OA is going to do. The OA hasn't told us what they're going to do. And so we're left with trying to evaluate the past, where the OA staked for the big event of Big Payday, and then pretty much has left everything alone since then until this year, where a whole bunch of staking took place in March. And now the question is, do we have enough information to decide what the OA is going to do? No. So we can only guess, but we can guess intelligently. The OA could do nothing, and the stake will end. This 35 billion hex the stake will hit maturity. And if no one does anything, the 35 billion stays in the stake. After 2 weeks, it'll start being penalized and distributed as penalties. And it's unlikely that's like the most unlikely scenario, because again, this is DeFi. If the OA does not end, but another user does good account it, then this hex just gets put off to the side. It doesn't get released. It doesn't become circulating. It doesn't become minted. It just sits off to the side waiting for the OA to do something. But the T-shares come out of the pool. And so this 35 billion, however many T-shares that is, would being removed, the T-shares being removed will increase the payout incrementally, but it's a very tiny amount. It's not a windfall. So the payout per T-share per day would be fractions more, but it would go up, and over time that would make a difference. But again, boil the frog scenario. We look at the payouts. Now the OA could also end, and if the OA does end, then all of the hex that was rewarded becomes minted, and because it becomes minted, payouts go up, and then we would wait to see what the OA is going to do next. Well, restake, and it could very well restake all the way out Quattro Cinco and start building its own ladder. Right? I mean, that's a possibility. And then all of a sudden, instead of having just those few T-shares out there, we start seeing yearly stakes. This is kind of my favorite opinion, but I guess we'll see. We would just have these continued yearly kind of guardrails around HEX going into the future. Kind of makes me wish I could live another 100 years, so I can see how this plays out. All right, let's go take a look at some of the prices and things that are out there, packaged products, related tokens. So just looking at things related to HEX, related to the actuator protocol, we do see pretty common action between, or some commonality for sure, between things that are closely tied to HEX. On the Helgo, which is one of my funniest favorite meme and incentive protocols out there. You can actually go out there and farm and whatnot. You have to go to their website, do some research, but You can farm and provide LP and whatnot, but they have 1.2 million in liquidity with HEX. Looks like it's down on the 24 hours a bit. Hedron minus 12%. Deci and Maxi. Maxi looks like it's up a little bit in the last 24 hours, but Deci down 5.48%. Com, well, of course, is a incentive reward token for native HEX stakers. So that's down 7% or so. We go look at the benefits of getting Maxi or Deci. You can look at Deci here as being the best opportunity if you want to get into something like a HEX package product, which just means there's a stake out there that was sourced and as a group sourced kind of a stake, group stake. That stake is going to pay 2.36 HEX per Deci when it comes out, and that means that it's effectively paying, and that's my guess that that's what it'll be, but it's effectively paying 26% APR just for holding the token. And in my mind, you have to be willing to hold it all the way to 2032. If I was going to take position in that, there could be opportunities where the market cycles back and forth, of course. Maxi, on the other hand, a little bit less of a discount in my mind, but earning 13%, 14% APR if you look at it that way. If we go look at the HTTs that are out there and what's been happening with them, so you guys can go look at the actuator.finance website, and they have tutorials up there and videos. Somebody asked me today about putting up a tutorial on how to mint and how that system works. They have a pretty extensive library of documents, and there is an actuator YouTube. I've added a playlist here on my channel called Actuator, and you can go to that playlist and you'll see their videos explaining how to use the ecosystem there. But pretty much they follow along in price with whatever HEX is doing. And there are opportunities out there, for instance, when there are mispricings, and this is a very complicated, probably next level concept. But when I talk about the walled garden and people wanting to be able to earn the 1 to 4% on the HEX stakes, then that leads me down another path where I'm like, well, what else is available out there? And people can, set up Cuatro Cincos. They can do stakes that'll be, 7,777 days, and then lock those stakes in the future, and then actually build a market for them and trade them. And so we're seeing kind of this burgeoning new little market of bond trading. It's best we've corresponded over is bond trading. Kind of compare it to TradFi, and people were able to trade, and we see people doing this all day long. Trading between these different HTTs based on their value to HEX to create more HEX. There's a lot going on in that ecosystem. Just looking at ways to get into HEX right now. In terms of ratio, the best way to get into HEX is through EDI or stable at the moment, because it's the lowest, in comparison to that. The next best deal is PulseX, because PulseX went up. Is to swap from PulseX into PHEX, and then the EHEX into PHEX isn't a bad move either, if you're interested in moving from EHEX. And a lot of people are doing the opposite, but they have all sorts of different strategies. All right, I think that covers all the things that I might want to show today, unless there's some questions that come up. We'll look at our longer tier type stuff. Oh yeah, well, let's go back to the 120. Again, we don't know what's going to happen with the OA, in here in March, but there could be a situation that occurs in March of 2026 where we see a flippening of the share rate. It's kind of interesting to see it on the screen, even if it doesn't happen, where the share rate for for the hex, the PX side on pulse chain may actually become higher than the EX side. And as we get closer, we'll monitor that. But that'd be a pretty fun narrative to see that flip. We'll see where that goes. That could be happening. When we look out to 2027, I think we're probably on target. We're already above 43, but we're probably on target, for almost reaching 44 by the end of this month. And end of 26, 49,477 ish. So somewhere around that 49.50 range. And then as we go all the way to 27, 50, 54, 55,000. Again, subject to change, right? Because everything after today hasn't happened yet. And so this is a forecast of what will happen. It is not the future. We don't know for sure, but we can do the calculations, and based on the current information, this is kind of what it looks like. So these numbers will be different. Just don't know how different. At one point, we were thinking, I was thinking these would be 10,000 hex higher for each year because the OA had not staked, but then the OA did stake, and that changed everything. And again, going out the very long term look ahead, we could see 80K, 77K, 74K. So this range of the future where we might be anywhere from 75 to 80,000 hex per T-share. And again, I'll say it. I don't want to make it sound like it's a definite. It's not a definite. I don't know what's going to be. I'm going to have to watch how the system plays out. And the closer you get to today's date, the more reliable these share rates probably are going to be, right? Because there's just fewer days in the future for the stakes to earn, and so we can have the calculation and know what we think they'll be as we go into the future. So with that, let's go one more round of looking at questions, see if we got anything else out here. Yep, I like that. I like the Helgo as well. I like the Helgo. Yeah, I liked it because of the meme. A lot of people probably not even sure what the hell the meme is. We had a guy, of course, people are funny. We had a guy who, by the name of Helgo, who was in one of the chats, and this is early Hex, and I don't know if it was a parody account or not. It could have been a parody account, but I think it was actually a real person, Helgorian. And anyways, this guy was from Europe somewhere, at least that's the story. Did not, English was not his first language, and he was a very energetic poster and to the Telegram, and he posted a lot of things that would not have come across, fully translated. And so there were a lot of funny memes, a lot of funny stories that came from that. And a bunch of guys, for whatever reason, Hex OGs decided to meme that. They memed it and they created a token. And so there's a whole backstory with it. But it's very Hex-centric. That's why there's so much liquidity with Hex. And that's what we've been seeing. But that's out there. But they have a nice little loop within it and a DAO. And you can go read their documentation. All right. Yeah. I think, you're asking, I do wonder what RH would think of this evolution of Hex and all immutable and DeFi. I think this is something that he has thought about. I think his worldview has changed a bit. And now this is quite dated because it's years ago that he's mentioned anything about Hex staking and doing things like HSIs or whatnot. But originally, if you're like the truest of the true OG, the truth engine meant something to you, and the truth engine being the code of Hex and the fact that you made a commitment to the Hex contract for a period of time. And so that was your commitment that you made, and it was the truth engine, right? And it was kind of like the the maxi approach to Hex. Now that worked pretty good in terms of creating that first run up, of course, with HEX, and there's a lot of factors. It's not just staking that caused, the euphoria of HEX. In fact, as I was talking about before, staking itself doesn't change the price. It's a secondary effect if people are actually buying it. Anyways, I believe that in theory, RH 100% expected something like this to be developed, like the actuator protocol, like the Hedron system. And I believe that, he has changed his worldview a bit based on comments that he could see this. I mean, how else would you trade T-shares if not through a derivative market? And so anyways, I think he's in support of it, but that doesn't mean he endorses any of the specific products, though. Right? That's not what I mean. I mean, conceptually, I think he's on it. And people feel free to reach out to RH once in a while or post up about it and ask him what he thinks. I've done some. I've done some of that tagging. See Acid Thunder out there. Yeah, the Legend of Helgo. Yeah. All right. Well, I guess maybe the final thing is the Truth Engine rewards for honoring your word. It does. It does. It does. The HSIs give you a little bit different optionality, which is why some people oppose them when they came out, and why some people still oppose them, because it is the ability to actually move those around, sell them, put them on the market, give them away, which is different than just a HEX stake that's native. All right, my friends. Well, listen, hit the like, subscribe, share this out to somebody who might be interested. And again, welcome to our walled garden of HEX. And you guys stay crispy. And we'll see you next time.
Yo, T, urgent HEX buy signal. Charts flaming hot.
Golden ratio, huh? That's how legends stack T-shares.
Get them while they're crispy, folks. This window won't stay open long.
Stake smart. Win big. Time rewards those who act.
Stay crispy, Hexicans.
You gotta move it, move it! Feel the rhythm of the blockchain.